In both the phase 1 and phase 2, how did you get to your customers? What was the funnel or the channel through which you're getting the customers? How did they find you? Why would they sign up?
So we didn't have like a marketing person. We didn't have like a specific channel strategy. What we did have was a fairly large network from the founding team. Basically, all of the people who we were connected with, all of the acquaintances, friends, contacts, colleagues, etc., who we knew were part of like the ICP, the ideal customer profile. So even with that definition, we had something in the region of 300 to 400, at least, people who we could just send a text message to or shoot an email to and say, hey, I'd like to get you on board. I'd like to have you start using Superhuman as your only email client from here on out. Can you do that? And so that was actually how we got started in phase 1. We don't yet have Android support or iPhone support or Outlook support or Windows support. And so 7 out of 10 people would need one of those things. And we just said, we're really sorry, we don't have that just yet. It's not worth your time yet as a customer. It's not worth your money yet to pay us to get on board to Superhuman right now. Let us take a note of what you need and we'll circle back. The cool thing is then you obviously take a note, you build the thing, whether it's a year later or 3 years later or 6 months later, it doesn't matter. But then when you build the thing, you then let those customers know, hey, we have built this thing now. So you send out those like 10,000 emails or whatever. It's like, hey, everyone who wanted the Android app, like it's now ready, right? And then now it's obviously very delightful, very exciting for customers. Like how often does a company actually remember that or have the systems in place to actually get back to you when they have the thing that you want? So that was an early part. That was a big part of our early strategy in terms of getting those customers. I'd say the last thing that we did, and I think this is really important.
Thrivers all around the world, welcome back to Thrivecast. I'm your host, Guru Raj, and today we have a truly superhuman, I was about to say super phenomenon, but superhuman guest with us, Gaurav Vohra, and he's here to share with us the ongoing PLG journey of Superhuman. I'm sure many of you already know about Superhuman. We'll ask Gaurav to have a brief about what it is, but here's a quick introduction about our guest. By the way, I've been trying this a little bit. I asked ChatGPT to introduce Gaurav, and I gave him a couple of LinkedIn records to see how it goes. And it summarized me the 4 following things. The first one, it said, Gaurav is an email jiu-jitsu master. I will find out if that's true or not. The second is, he's an emoji whisperer. So I'm not sure whether it's because of Superhuman's capability to add emojis or whether Gaurav's been using emojis on his LinkedIn. We'll find out more. The third one, it says a productivity guru. That looks like very obvious. Superhuman solves the productivity problem. The fourth one, I found this very interesting. Captain keyboard shortcut. So Gaurav is the captain keyboard shortcut. Nevertheless, wow. I don't know whether ChatGPT is hallucinating. Gaurav, what do you think of that?
That's phenomenal. I'm impressed at Silicon's ability to think and to capture the essence of who I am based on just a couple of LinkedIn posts and other materials. But I don't think it's hallucinating. No, I think that's actually incredibly accurate. I am an emoji whisperer. I am Captain Keyboard Shortcuts, productivity guru, and email jiu-jitsu master. Although I think I probably use emoji about as much as most other people do these days. So I don't know if that one is necessarily unique about me.
So you're part of the new generation. There you go.
Yeah. So let's go with that. Yeah.
By the way, I wasn't very sure about whether these introductions were right. So I wrote my own small tidbit as well. And for the listeners, some of this might be controversial, so grab some headphones there. Here's a sneak peek about it. It's all about hair, head, and hands. So let's quickly go through that and then we'll come on the other side. Let's start with the hair. Well, I got to know that Gaurav and Rahul's being the Superhuman CEO, they are brothers by birth, but I couldn't tell them apart. The only way I could tell them apart is the flowing hair from Gaurav that you can see on YouTube or Spotify video. So there you go. That's about the hair. Quickly jump into the head. Well, when I looked up, Gaurav, your last 9+ years at Superhuman, you have the most number of head of title I've seen in any of the LinkedIn profiles. You have been head of analytics, head of product and marketing, head of growth. Looks like there's a theme at Superhuman. There's an ownership aspect of what you do at Superhuman, so head of automatically flies in. Or maybe that's something about you. So I'm not sure of that. And the last one being that you are a handy Superman. There's some pun, handy Superman. Gaurav has single-handedly, and I got to know about this in my previous conversation with him as well as with his team, that he, along with Rahul, have single-handedly hand-onboarded about 500 to 1,000 customers in the first 1.5 to 2 years' time. So forgive the pun, he's a very handy Superman there.
I really appreciate that. I have one more pun to throw on the pile, which is that sometimes people ask me, why did I grow my hair out? to be long. And I sometimes tell them that I can't be a head of growth without a head of growth, which people then sometimes stare at me with a blank face.
Well, that's British humor. They don't probably like it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Maybe it's a little too dry.
Oh, that's
me. I used to be a management consultant. I used to have short hair. In fact, I even wore like a tie to work.
Oh, wow. I can't imagine that. He's looking at you now. Maybe to the listeners who may not necessarily know, I'm sure everyone knows about Superhuman, but could you tell a little bit about what is Superhuman and the incredible journey that you and your team are to make email the most productive thing out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. So Superhuman is the fastest email experience ever made. We are for teams and for individuals of people who spend time today doing email, and we help you get through your inbox twice as fast as before. Previously, people were used to doing email in a very slow, inefficient, cumbersome, and painful way, using tools like Gmail and Outlook, but then cobbling in other tools on top to try and get their actual work done. It's a very bad kind of state of affairs to be in if it's something that you depend on, and if your job's success depends on you being good at it, then the current state of affairs is a very bad one indeed. Superhuman takes all of that to the next level, helps you save a tremendous amount of time and get through your inbox twice as fast as before.
So that's an incredible journey that you've had. Is this the new pitch that you have, or did you change this pitch maybe in the last 9+ years? Maybe let me ask this slightly differently. Did you start with this particular goal that Superhuman has to become the super productivity tool out there, potentially replacing or maybe adding on top of the existing email providers out there? How did it start? Could you tell the story a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a general point here, which is interesting, which is that every product or company should probably be asking themselves the question of whether their tagline or their kind of mission is still relevant, let's say every 18 to 24 months. The answer might be yes, and you might go for another 18 to 24 months with the same mission, or you might change it. We started out in 2015 with visually gorgeous, blazingly fast email. Like that was the tagline. That was what you could see on superhuman.com. That's how we described it to investors. That's what we discussed with early employees. And it's what we built. We built visually gorgeous, blazingly fast email. Note that there are two value propositions kind of boiled into one there. There's one aspect that's to do with the visual element and the design. And then there's another that's to do with the speed of the product. And actually, that's what we had for about 3 or 4 years. Until there was a very interesting conversation I distinctly remember having, actually with my cousin, who is an early Superhuman customer. When you have an early product, you onboard.
Wow, fully first.
Yeah, exactly. And he pointed out that actually the value proposition of Superhuman was kind of fuzzy. He was saying, well, like blazingly fast, visually gorgeous, it's immediately two things that you're splitting the difference across. And he pointed out that if I were to go and ask employees at Superhuman, what are we building? I would probably hear like 30 different things for the 30 teammates that we had around that time. And he was right. There was a discrepant view in the employees of this small team of only 30 people about what we were building. Some people thought it was more about the design focus. Some people thought it was more about the speed. Other people thought it was about the speed of the product versus the speed of the user, and so on and so forth. So we actually did a first pass, a revamp of that messaging to call it the fastest email experience ever made. And to drop the design aspect from the message, just noting that design is going to be something that speaks for itself when you engage with the brand and the product. We don't need it to be in the messaging. And in addition, to add far more substance underneath that claim, to say things like, you will get through your inbox twice as fast as before. Our customers tell us that they save 3 hours per week. And then further value proposition messaging around inbox relief, feeling calmer, being more responsive, and so on. And so then that stood for the next 3 or 4 years as well. In the last, let's say, 2 years, we've introduced 2 new elements to that overall narrative. Element number 1 is that we've introduced AI to our overall narrative. If you go to superhuman.com today, you'll see that in the heading, we say AI-powered email, which is true. We have half a dozen different AI features that are incredibly powerful, doing everything from summarizing your emails for you, to helping you write better emails, to auto-correcting you as you type. There's a tremendous amount of power that comes from AI that just 24 months ago didn't even exist in the world, let alone inside of Superhuman. So we've added AI to the overall messaging. And second, we've added teams to the messaging. We'll get into this a bit later, but the journey of Superhuman has been from B2C initially to more of a B2B motion that is still built on top of that very strong B2C foundation. And it's really important, therefore, that we message that we are, in fact, something that entire teams of people use together and with one another. And that's more and more of what we're seeing. And it's something that, as we'll talk about later, I'm sure, we've been pushing incredibly hard on in the last 12 to 18 months.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, you still retained, you kept on changing the messaging, but the primary value proposition of being visually incredible, ensuring that the speed or the productivity gain that it comes with using the tool is a lot more, probably a magnitude more than any other tools comparatively. But still, you kind of maintain. So the reason I wanted to bring you or someone from Superhuman on this particular podcast is you're probably aware that this is more of the product-led growth community out there, probably one of the largest ones that's growing. And you still retain much of the PLG DNA within the company. Maybe just recount a couple of them. You are incredibly viral, right? There's a word of mouth. People know about you guys. There's been stories being written about how Rahul, when he published the product market fit document, I think a couple of years back, that went viral. Your onboarding aspects that even though you were not completely self-served, people will still find you, they will sign up, and someone from your team, probably yourself, Rahul, or the large team that now you have built, would talk to them, hand onboard them. If I'm saying it right, you started calling them as hand onboard. Some people might call it as white glove treatment or white glove onboarding, but you call them as hand onboard. So you essentially helped every single customer, initially probably for the first 100, 200 odd customers, actually more than that, through this hand onboarding journey. So could you start maybe your journey on, as you build the value proposition, you built the positioning of the product about 8 or 9 or maybe 9.5 years back, when you got your first version out, could you tell the story of what was there at that time? And then how did it come to the state that it is in? By the way, to the listeners, Gaurav and I, we were chatting before this particular call as well. And I think there's really 4 distinct phases of your growth. And your team also mentioned that during the product-led growth GTM conference, where you're talking more and more of the 4th phase of the growth, which is go from a B2C to teams to enterprise. But I would like to maybe scroll back a little bit and start from phase 1, where your product is out there, and now you're hand onboarding them. So could you tell the story from that particular phase and how did it grow from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So scrolling all the way back to phase 1, and we could say that phase 1 of building Superhuman, phase 1, I think, of building just about any company is getting to product market fit. It's basically the first step that you need to accomplish as a startup is, have we built something and is the market there, and is the thing that we have built solving the problem deeply enough for that market, right? That's product market fit. Mm-hmm. Rahul's obviously published the sort of thought leadership piece around how you measure that, how you make sure that you're iterating towards product market fit over time, asking customers, how disappointed would you be if this product were to go away tomorrow? Mm-hmm. And there's 2 ways you can change that and improve that score. You can try different people, i.e. shift the market, or you can build a better product, right? So solve the problem more deeply for the market. And we were doing both, right? Like we were making sure that we were iterating towards the right market, but we were also building the better product. So phase 1 of the life cycle of the company was a tremendous amount of R&D to build a basic functional email client, but then to add in the features and the functionality that would get to the point where 40% or more of the customers who we were getting onto the product were answering, I would be very disappointed if this product were to disappear tomorrow, right? That's the definition or the threshold that you could consider the way you have product market fit. So that phase, that was a couple of years worth. And actually during that phase, we started our go-to-market journey. We started hand onboarding, or concierge onboarding is what it has come to be known as now. We started that concierge onboarding process in that phase because while you're building the product, you need the customers to tell you what their answer to that question is. You need that feedback. So you need a minimal amount of throughput in your system so that you start to have enough feedback to work with, whether it's bug reports, whether it's feature requests, whether it's just standing up your go-to-market motion, and then, of course, asking them the question of how disappointed would you be? So we're not talking a tremendous number of customers at this time. Like you said, I think between Rahul and I, we probably onboarded somewhere in the region of 500 to maybe 1,000 customers in total ever. We then started to move towards phase 2, right? And phase 2 is when you've reached product market fit, or you're very close to product market fit. You can see a line of sight towards it, and you're starting to stand up your go-to-market functions. And as the person at Superhuman who actually built all those functions out, 0 to 1ing those things is no easy task, right? Because you start off by doing all the work yourself. You're generally straddling or juggling maybe 3 or 4 areas. But then you need to bring in folks who are actually going to take those areas on. And in doing so, you have to really slow down, figure out everything that you're doing, turn it into something that you can transfer and download into somebody else's brain, and then let go of those Legos. You need to then let that person or let that team grow and evolve and tackle the business problem. I'm a big advocate of standing up your go-to-market functions, starting with the most fundamental, or I guess the lowest down in the funnel, i.e. starting with your support team. Make sure that you have a really great support, or in some companies, customer success function. So you have one person who does that, and then you move your way upwards. So you have one person who then maybe does onboarding or implementation. You have one person who does, let's call it pre-onboarding. Maybe it's kind of a BDR role or a pre-sales role or like an account executive sort of a role. Basically somebody whose job it is to get the leads and get them towards the sale. And then you go up market of there, or up funnel, I should say, of there. And then you build your kind of lead generation, your demand generation. That's exactly what we did. So we built our customer delight team and that function. Then we built our onboarding team. They were the people who were actually hand onboarding customers. And we built our kind of growth engine, like the system that preceded even getting onto the onboarding call. And then we built the marketing team. And these were like 4 teams or 4 areas that I built out successively to get from 0 to 1. Getting to like a basic...
Let me ask a question on that. I think in both the phase 1 and phase 2, how did you get to your customers? What was the funnel or the channel through which you're getting the customers? Were the customers finding you unbeknownst of you talking to them? Or how did they find you? Why would they sign up when you were not that dominant yet?
Yeah, this was a question of, I guess it's probably just like founder-led marketing, right? So we didn't have like a marketing person. We didn't have like a specific channel strategy. What we did have was a fairly large network from the founding team. Basically, all of the people who we were connected with, all of the acquaintances, friends, contacts, colleagues, etc., who we knew were part of like the ICP, the ideal customer profile that we were going after, which is this sort of founder persona or this leader in a tech company who spends a lot of time on email and really needs something better, or the venture capitalist or sort of the investor who, again, spends a lot of time in email and really needs something better. So even with that definition, we had something in the region of 300 to 400, at least, people who we could just send a text message to or shoot an email to and say, hey, I'd like to get you on board. I'd like to have you start using Superhuman as your only email client from here on out. Can you do that? And so that was actually how we got started in phase 1, right? Which is that very sort of like early get to product market fit. And so the people that I and Rahul and other folks on the team were like spending time with as customers were literally like friends, family, but also VCs who we knew and founders of companies who were sort of on our radar. Now, this presents an interesting challenge because in some respects, you really don't want to mess it up for that audience. They are highly influential. They're basically the kind of person who their email is like so important to them that there cannot be any issues or any bugs in the software. So we set the bar for ourselves really high, which was a deliberate choice. It's kind of like taking the hard path. It meant that we had to work really, really hard on R&D and making sure that things like reliability and engineering, speed of the product itself, its ability to work offline, like we had to make sure all of those things were actually really up to scratch before we were able to even get the person using the product. But again, we just set that bar really high, and I think that paid off because it internally created the right environment for us to think about quality of the product. We weren't just chasing after numbers. We weren't just chasing after getting to 10,000 or 100,000 users, where those users would potentially churn out 2 weeks later because they've encountered all sorts of bugs and issues. I will say that in addition to the high expectation customer, we actually call it the HXC, the highest expectation customer. In addition to them, we did also have like a flotilla of customers we were being more experimental with. So call these the folks who were beating down our door really hard to get access to Superhuman. And they might be designers at random companies or product managers or marketing people or ops people or BD people. And they just really wanted access to Superhuman. So they weren't necessarily in our ideal customer profile definition, but we were maybe 20%, 30% of our customer volume, we were open to that kind of person coming in. So we did also have those customers as well. And they were incredibly helpful because they would often give us some of the most detailed, copious feedback about what we needed to improve. Although if you're going to take a strategy approach like that, it's really important to acknowledge that you don't want to build everything for everyone, right? So some feature requests coming through from that group, we just had to say, that makes sense. We love the idea. It's on our roadmap. It might not be a while until we get to it, right? It's very common for designers, for example, to really want a unified inbox feature because they have that feature in Mac Mail. They have that feature in their current email client. Designers, especially those who work with lots of companies or who have freelanced, may own like 10 email addresses. So they really just want to unify those 10 email addresses into one place. But that's not a feature that the investor or the CEO persona really cares about. And it's very, very expensive to build. So that's an example where we got that feedback, we got that feature request, but we judiciously decided it's not actually something we want to build right now. So that's how we got those customers. How did they find out about us? Like I said, through our personal network and connections. But then what we were doing in the early days of Superhuman was a lot of brand building and a lot of excitement generation. Mm-hmm. So we published our website on the day that Dropbox actually shut down Mailbox, which is one of the email companies that previously popularized the idea that you can build an email client that you use instead of Gmail or Outlook. And the Mailbox was loved, right, by the tech community. But Dropbox announced that shutdown. And then on the day it was actually sunset and shut down, we launched our new superhuman.com, huge flashy moment, all the features, all of the excitement, all the jazz. And that alone generated tens of thousands of signups, right? These are people putting their email address in on the website. We then did a similar thing on Product Hunt. We did a huge launch on Product Hunt. We got to number one. We actually co-launched with Product Hunt /upcoming, which is a section of Product Hunt that features products that are not yet launched. And that also generated somewhere in the region of 40 or 50,000 signups. So immediately, not immediately, I suppose within about a year, we had something in the realm of 100,000 signups, but we were still only dealing with order of a few hundred customers, right? We were being very, very choosy and very, very particular about how many people we let in because we knew that we didn't have a complete product. We only had a desktop product that only worked in the browser. There was no mobile app. There was no native app. It only worked on macOS. And it only worked with Gmail. So there were a number of restrictions. So we had basically a lot of people who wanted access, but we were telling them, we're not ready yet. And on top of that, we implemented a bit of a fun system of referrals. So you got to jump the wait list. If someone who was an existing customer gave you a referral, right, then you could get to the top of the queue. Then we would get you onto the product. Notwithstanding the fact that we still retain the right to say, no, we're really sorry. We don't yet have Android support or iPhone support or Outlook support or Windows support. And so 7 out of 10 people would need one of those things. And we just said, we're really sorry. We don't have that just yet. It's not worth your time yet as a customer. It's not worth your money yet to pay us to get on board to Superhuman right now. Let us take a note of what you need and we'll circle back. The cool thing is then you obviously take a note, you build the thing, whether it's a year later or 3 years later or 6 months later, it doesn't matter. But then when you build the thing, you then let those customers know, hey, we have built this thing now. So you send out those 10,000 emails or whatever. It's like, hey, everyone who wanted the Android app, it's now ready, right? And then now it's obviously very delightful, very exciting for customers. How often does a company actually remember that or have the systems in place to actually get back to you when they have the thing that you want? So that was an early part. That was a big part of our early strategy in terms of getting those customers. I'd say the last thing that we did, and I think this is really important if you're trying to build, let's say, hype or sort of intrigue and appeal, is you have to be building in public to a degree. You have to be incredibly responsive on social media. You have to have your voice out there. What happens if you don't do that? Well, it's very clear that you're trying to build hype and then people start to get suspicious and negative towards you. They're what is going on here? We never hear from this company. We don't know what's going on. But if you're building in public, if you're active on social media every day, you are literally personally responding to people's questions, feedback, support, etc., on Twitter, on LinkedIn, etc., people will see that you're there, right? You're doing the thing, you're building the product. And we did a lot of that. We spent a lot of time with our customers, our community, our prospects on Twitter in particular, just to make sure that we were listening to the customer and hearing what people were saying. But I think it's an important part of building a community is that you're actually there with the community day in and day out. And I think that's a really important part of what worked for us in those early days as well.
Got it. So maybe let me summarize this just for the audience as well. So in phase one, acquisition was mostly founder-led. When I say founder-led, it's not just maybe you and Rahul together, but it's a combination of other people within the team, maybe the early founding team. You'd go out and through your word of mouth, get your friends and family to come to you. A question around that part, was your product free at that time or did you have a paid version of it?
We had a free version of it and a paid version. And we let certain friends and family in on the free version,
Oh, okay.
And actually required 99% of people to go onto the paid version. So I think the first maybe 20 people I onboarded, it was just free. It was friends and family. They were doing me a favor, right? I was spending 90 minutes with them, getting them onboarded, hugely detailed set of discovery questions, figuring out their workflow, their productivity stack, and then getting them set up. But eventually we got to the point where we're every person who we're onboarding, they have to be paying. There's no value anymore from incremental free customers. We need to know that what we're building is worth $30 a month. And so the very first step of those onboardings was to get them to swipe their credit card. And in fact, what happened when we did that was the quality of the feedback we were receiving just went through the roof. People are paying $30 a month. You can sure as hell bet they're going to tell you about their feedback, right? And they're going to try harder. They're going to activate more deeply. They will actually pay attention to everything that you're telling them, as opposed to thinking it's a throwaway gimmicky tool. So one of the pieces of advice I regularly have for new companies is charge from day one. It's really important that you know that what you're building is worth some money. The only reason to not charge from day one is if there's some network effect you're trying to see, there's some virality you have to kind of let take hold, and then you can monetize later. And or you may be in some kind of a land grab situation, maybe with other companies. So yeah, you might need to go free to begin with and then figure it out later. But if those things aren't true, you should charge from day one. It's going to really force you to build something that's actually worth money.
Okay, I think that's a valuable piece of advice. So in phase one, founder-led acquisition, and you had a free and a paid version, but you kept the free to be maybe a small limit of just maybe 1 to 2% of the customers being free just to get them maybe connected. But most of the goal was to incentivize them to go to the paid version. You somehow managed a massive paid or massive wait lists, even at that phase, with product hunt launch, with referrals and various other plays around it. At what point in time do you think you went to phase two, where you say, hey, now enough is enough, we had to go, we can't scale what we currently have. Let's go build out a GTM play, a small GTM team towards it. And you mentioned about 4 different hires, right? The marketing hire, the support hire, the onboarding, and the concierge desk, maybe with 1 person or so, and then the system to build out. So at what point did you go from, or rather graduate from phase 1 to phase 2?
It was a combination. It was getting to the point where we had product market fit. We were getting to that 40% very disappointed score. It was also looking at my own calendar and realizing that I was completely devoid of any time to do anything whatsoever because I was just stacked with customer conversations back to back. And at that point, it's like, well, I need to find someone to help me with this part of the job, right? So that was a very recurring theme in the first couple of years, is sort of asking that question of like, how saturated as the founding team are you with activities? But also, have you actually earned the right to invest in the go-to-market team? Like, do you have product market fit?
Got it. And you were funded at that time, right? Or you were not bootstrapped. Is that correct?
Yeah, we had funding.
Okay, you had funding even at that stage. So how long did you think the phase 2 lasted? Or where you built out the team, and did you raise the price? Or did you keep the price to be $30 a month, even from the very outset?
We kept the price at $30 a month. I mean, technically speaking, some folks may remember Superhuman was $29 a month for about a year, but then we increased it to $30, and it's been at $30 for a while. The duration of phase 2, building out the early go-to-market motions, I would say is around maybe 3-4 years or so, right? And each team that I mentioned, getting it from 0 to 1 is probably 3 to 6 months of effort. You have to hire the first person, train them, maybe hire the second and third person, train those folks. And just that alone takes like 1 or 2 years to get 3 or 4 teams spun up to a high degree of quality. And then getting to the point where each of those teams starts to have its own manager, it starts to be a bit more self-sufficient. And you get to the point where those teams are then growing, maybe in parallel to each other. And this starts to get into what I consider to be more like phase 3, which is scaling your go-to-market motion. So at that point, we're drawing down our waitlist, right? Like we have a waitlist. I think the highest it got was something like 500,000, some astonishingly high figure. And we have like all these email addresses, right? And then we're like, how do we comb through this? What do we do with this list of emails? Well, we just work through it. So we're drawing down the waitlist. We're building up our ability to support and serve a higher volume of customers. So we're scaling support, we're scaling onboarding, we're scaling our marketing function. We're getting to the point where each of these becomes like legitimate bona fide teams that has like a clear mission, a clear purpose. And that was another couple of years. At the same time, you're putting in efficiencies. You're doing things that make those teams far more efficient, putting in the tooling for the support team to answer 200 emails in a week instead of 50 emails in a week. You're putting in materials for customers to be able to answer their own questions. And you're constantly fixing issues and bugs that mean that your onboarding team doesn't have to focus on those things quite so much anymore. So that, I would say, is like phase 3, which is then starting to scale and kind of make those processes more robust and get to the point where, as a company, things are more stabilized, things are more fully fledged. And indeed, you're working on the core product experience and getting to the point where there is an end-to-end full product experience for your customers they would consider to be feature complete.
So let me ask a couple of questions. So maybe there are 3 or 4 questions in that. The first one is the time range for each of these phases. Can I assume maybe the first phase, which is founder-led acquisition, probably lasting about 2 years or so? Would that be right to say?
Maybe more like a year.
2 to 3 years. Okay. And the second phase, probably about the same, maybe 3 to 4 years time.
So the first phase, I think, is about a year. And I think the second phase is maybe like 2 years or so.
Okay. Got it. So yeah, double. And the third phase probably added up probably 1 more year to that. And at that time, I guess you're dealing with about maybe 30,000, 40,000 new signups a month.
I mean, our exact funnel numbers varied humongously based on what we were doing. Yeah. So, and also because we were a paid product, like the shape of our funnel is very different, I think, to most companies, where if you're freemium or have a free trial, the shape is wildly different, but certainly dealing with that order of magnitude of footfall.
Got it. And the question about the waitlist, I think you might have had a massively big waitlist. I think you mentioned about 500,000 users on the waitlist. Did you put them on a waitlist with a certain criteria, meaning, hey, some of these customers only want an Android app, and unless until we get the Android app, we should not re-invite them? Did you manage some kind of these are the features that they want, unless until we actually go build it, there's no reason for us to get them in?
Correct. Yeah, technically speaking, we've had two tables. We had a signups table. This is like a list of email addresses. If you put your email address on the website, that enters the signups table. We then had what we call the prospects table. These are people who have progressed from being a sign-up to being someone who is actually kind of like a prospect. Ordinarily, a B2C company doesn't have anywhere near this level of rigor or sophistication. Right. You're just sort of trying to get people into the product. But we had this concept of a prospect. And against the prospect, we noted if you needed Android or if you needed Outlook or something else. Right. So between the signups and the prospects as like data sources, we had a bunch of information that we could then use to deliver a better customer experience. Right. And yeah, we actually noted in the prospects table all of that information initially manually, but then we made heavy use of a type form survey to kind of streamline gathering that data.
Interesting.